The bright lights of Lunar Research Station Alpha cast long shadows across the polished floor of Laboratory 6. Dr. Christopher Lane stared at his computer screen, his tired eyes reflecting the complex equations that danced before him. It was 3 a.m. Earth time, but on the moon, time seemed to flow differently, especially when you were on the verge of something big. "Chris, you need to see this." Dr. Amanda Walsh's voice broke through his concentration. She stood at her workstation, her blonde hair tied back in a messy bun, her face lit by the soft blue glow of holographic projections. Chris pushed away from his desk, his chair gliding smoothly in the moon's reduced gravity. He had worked with Amanda long enough to know when something was important. As he approached her station, he noticed the unusual pattern in her gravity wave readings. "The field is stable," Amanda said, pointing to a particularly steady line in her data. "We've never achieved this level of consistency before." Chris leaned closer, his heart beginning to race. "Run it again," he said quietly, trying to keep his excitement in check. They had been working on gravity manipulation for 3 years, and false hopes had become an unwelcome friend. Amanda's fingers flew across the holographic controls. In the testing chamber behind them, a small metal sphere hung in the air, surrounded by a barely visible distortion field. As the test began, the sphere started to move, not in the erratic way they had seen hundreds of times before, but in a perfect, controlled circle. "Get Gary," Chris said, his voice barely above a whisper. "He needs to see this too." Minutes later, Gary Peterson hurried into the lab, still pulling on his lab coat. The engineering specialist had probably been sleeping, but his eyes were alert as he took in the scene before him. "What am I looking at?" Gary asked, running his hand through his disheveled brown hair. "Watch the field variance," Amanda said, pointing to a secondary display. "It's maintaining stability at 99.8%. Gary's eyes widened. "That's impossible. The energy requirements alone should make it impossible," Chris finished. "But look at the power consumption readings." The 3 scientists huddled around the display, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of data streams. The numbers told a story that seemed to defy everything they knew about physics. "We're using less than 1/10 of the predicted energy," Amanda explained, her voice trembling with excitement. "The field is almost self-sustaining." Chris walked over to the testing chamber's window. The sphere continued its perfect circular motion, defying the moon's natural gravitational pull. "Do you realize what this means?" he asked, turning to face his colleagues. Gary nodded slowly. "We can create controlled gravitational fields with minimal energy input. This changes everything. Space travel, construction, defense." "Defense," Chris repeated, his mind racing ahead. A ship equipped with this technology could perform maneuvers that would be impossible with conventional engines. We could change the nature of space combat itself. Amanda pulled up a new simulation on her screen. "Look at these projected applications," she said, displaying a series of complex scenarios. A vessel could create gravitational wells to deflect incoming fire, use controlled fields for instant direction changes, even manipulate enemy ships' trajectories. The implications were staggering. For years, humanity had been expanding into space, establishing colonies and research stations throughout the solar system. But they weren't alone out there. Several alien civilizations had made contact, and while some were friendly, others viewed human expansion with hostile eyes. "We need to contact the Council," Chris said firmly. "This isn't just a scientific breakthrough anymore. This could be the advantage humanity needs." Gary raised an eyebrow. "The Human Defense Council? Are you sure we're ready for that level of scrutiny?" Chris nodded. "We don't have a choice. The implications are too important to keep to ourselves." Amanda began compiling their data, her fingers moving swiftly across the holographic interface. "I'll prepare the initial report. We'll need to show them everything. The energy efficiency, field stability, potential applications." "Do it," Chris agreed. "But first, let's run a full battery of tests. When we present this to the Council, We need to be absolutely certain of our findings. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of activity. The team ran test after test, documenting every result, exploring every variable. They discovered that they could not only control the size and strength of the gravitational fields, but could also shape them with remarkable precision. By the time Station Alpha's day shift began arriving, the three scientists had compiled enough data to fill several databases. Their discovery was real, reproducible, and far more significant than any of them had initially realized. Chris stood in front of the testing chamber, watching as their latest experiment concluded. The metal sphere now danced through a complex series of movements, each one precisely controlled by their gravity manipulation field. "The report is ready," Amanda announced, looking up from her workstation. "I've included all our test results and projected applications. Gary's engineering analysis is particularly compelling." Gary had spent the last few hours creating detailed schematics showing how their technology could be integrated into existing spacecraft designs. "The beauty of it is the simplicity," he explained. "We won't need to rebuild our ships from scratch. The gravity control systems can be retrofitted into current designs." Chris took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "Send it," he said. "Mark it urgent, and send it directly to Admiral Morris's office." Amanda pressed a final button, and their report began its journey through the quantum communication network to Earth. In a matter of seconds, their discovery would be in the hands of the Human Defense Council. "What happens now?" Gary asked, stifling a yawn. Chris smiled slightly. Now we wait, and pray that the Council understands what we've given them." As if in response to his words, the metal sphere in the testing chamber completed one final perfect circle before settling gently back onto its stand. In the quiet of the lab, surrounded by humming equipment and glowing displays, three tired scientists stood in silence, knowing that they had just changed the course of human history. The artificial day cycle of Lunar Research Station Alpha continued around them, but in Laboratory 6, time seemed to stand still. They had done it. They had found a way to control gravity itself, and with it, they might have just secured humanity's future among the stars. Little did they know that their discovery had come not a moment too soon. As their report made its way to Earth, alien ships were already gathering in the darkness beyond Saturn's rings, preparing for a conflict that would test humanity's resolve, and their new technology to its absolute limits. Admiral Patricia Morris stood at the window of her office in the Human Defense Council headquarters, looking out over the gleaming spires of New Geneva. The morning sun cast long shadows across the city, but she barely noticed the view. Her attention was fixed on the holographic display floating above her desk, showing the latest attack reports from the outer colonies. 3 more outposts gone, Strategic Director Benjamin Carter said from behind her. "The Tylaxians aren't even trying to negotiate anymore. They're just destroying everything in their path." Patricia turned away from the window, her face grim. "Show me the Europa attack footage again." Ben waved his hand, and the hologram shifted to show a recording from the Europa colony's defense satellites. The images were stark and clear. 5 Xylaxian warships, their dark hulls gleaming with an oily sheen, systematically destroying the colony's defensive platforms. Their weapons cut through human shields like they were paper. "Their technology has improved," Patricia noted, watching as another defense platform exploded. "They're learning from each engagement." "That's not the worst part," Ben said, changing the display again. "Look at their numbers. We're tracking at least 300 ships moving through the outer system. They're gathering for something big." Patricia sat down at her desk, her mind racing through options. The Xylaxians had appeared 6 months ago, emerging from the darkness beyond Pluto's orbit. At first, they had seemed interested in diplomatic contact. But that had been a lie. They were just scouting humanity's defenses. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. "Admiral," her eye assistant announced, "you have an urgent communication from Lunar Research Station Alpha. Priority Level 1. "Display it," Patricia ordered. She didn't have time for scientific reports, but something marked priority one couldn't be ignored. As she read through the document, her eyes widened. "Ben," she said quietly, "look at this." Ben moved to read over her shoulder. "Gravity control. Is this real?" "The data looks solid," Patricia said, scrolling through the test results. "Dr. Lane and his team have found a way to create and manipulate gravitational fields with minimal energy cost. The military applications could change everything," Ben finished. He straightened up, running a hand through his graying hair. "But can we implement it in time?" Patricia was already sending commands through her terminal. "Get me a direct line to Station Alpha, and contact Mars Military Academy. We'll need their best engineers for this." Within minutes, Dr. Christopher Lane's face appeared on the main screen. He looked tired but alert. "Admiral Morris," he said, "I assume you've reviewed our findings." "I have, Doctor." "Tell me honestly, how quickly can we adapt this technology for military use?" Chris glanced off-screen, presumably at his colleagues. "With proper resources and support, we could have a working prototype ready for testing within 2 weeks. The basic principles are sound, and Engineer Peterson has already designed integration systems for our current ship classes." 2 weeks might not be enough," Ben said grimly. "The Tylaxians are massing their forces. We think they're planning a major offensive." "Then we'll have to work faster," Chris replied firmly. "Admiral, this technology could give us the edge we need. A ship equipped with our gravity control systems could perform maneuvers that would be impossible for the Tylaxians to counter." Patricia made her decision. "Dr. Lane, I'm ordering the immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel from Station Alpha. Your facility is now a military research installation. Director Carter will arrange for additional resources and personnel to be transferred to you immediately." "Yes, Admiral. We'll be ready." After the communication ended, Patricia turned to Ben. "Start moving our remaining ships into defensive positions around Mars and Earth. We need to buy Lane and his team as much time as we can. And if the Tylaxians attack before the technology is ready..." Patricia's face hardened. "Then we'll give them a fight they won't forget. But I don't intend to let that happen." The next 10 days passed in a blur of activity. At Station Alpha, Chris and his team worked around the clock, assisted by the best engineers and technicians the Human Defense Council could provide. The station's corridors echoed with the sound of construction as they converted one of the larger hangars into a testing facility for their prototype systems. Meanwhile, the Tylaxian fleet continued to gather. More human outposts fell silent, and the few survivors brought stories of overwhelming force and ruthless efficiency. The aliens seemed to be toying with humanity's defenses, probing for weaknesses. On the 11th day, as Chris and his team were preparing for their first full-scale test, the proximity alarms throughout the solar system began to scream. The Tylaxian fleet was on the move. In her office, Patricia received the reports with growing concern. "How many?" she asked Ben. 423 ships, he replied, his voice tense. "They're moving in formation toward the Saturn defense perimeter. If they break through there, they'll have a clear run at Mars and Earth." Patricia finished. She studied the tactical display, watching the massive red dots that represented the Tylaxian fleet. Time to intercept at Saturn. 36 hours at their current speed. Patricia opened a channel to Station Alpha. "Dr. Lane, the timeline has changed. How close are you to having something we can use?" Chris's face appeared, streaked with dirt and fatigue. "We've just completed our first successful test of a ship-mounted system. It's not perfect, but it works. The gravity fields are stable and controllable. Can you have it ready for deployment in 24 hours?" Chris hesitated for just a moment. "Yes," he said firmly. "We'll have it ready. But Admiral, we'll only have enough components for a small number of ships, maybe 10 at most." 10 ships will have to be enough," Patricia said. She turned to Ben after the communication ended. "Contact Colonel Bennett at the Saturn perimeter. Tell her to prepare her best pilots for immediate refit of their ships." Ben nodded and moved to comply. but paused at the door. The Tylaxians have better ships, better weapons, and they outnumber us more than 40 to 1. Even with this new technology, we still might lose, Patricia finished. But for the first time since this war began, we have a real chance to fight back. And that's all humanity has ever needed. As night fell over New Geneva, Patricia returned to the window of her office. Somewhere out there, beyond the peaceful view of the city, humanity's fate was hanging in the balance. But this time, they had a secret weapon, one that would show the Tylaxians that they had severely underestimated human ingenuity. The real question was, would it be enough? Commander Eric Russell paced the length of the Mars Military Academy's main hangar, his footsteps echoing off the high ceiling. Before him stood 10 of humanity's best combat ships, their hulls open and crawling with engineers and technicians. They had 18 hours left to get the gravity control systems installed and operational. Commander, Katie Martinez called from the cockpit of the lid ship. You need to see this. Eric climbed the maintenance ladder to join his best test pilot. Katie sat in the pilot's seat, her hands hovering over the newly installed controls. Through the cockpit window, he could see the red Martian landscape stretching to the horizon. Watch this, Katie said, her fingers dancing across the holographic display. The ship shuddered slightly, and then Eric felt a strange sensation in his stomach. Outside the window, the ground seemed to shift. We're floating, he realized. No engine power. Katie grinned. None. The gravity field is doing all the work. We're effectively creating our own pocket of space-time. She adjusted another control, and the ship moved smoothly sideways. The maneuverability is unlike anything I've ever seen. How are the power levels? Eric asked, remembering Dr. Lane's warnings about energy consumption. Steady at 12%. The field really is almost self-sustaining, just like they said. Katie's excitement was contagious. Commander, once we get these systems tuned properly, we'll be able to pull off maneuvers that should be impossible. Eric nodded, checking the time. Keep running your tests. I need to check on the other ships. Moving through the hangar, Eric stopped at each vessel, conferring with the engineering teams. Gary Peterson had come from Lunar Station Alpha to oversee the installations personally, and his expertise was proving invaluable. The field generators are integrating better than expected, Gary reported, emerging from beneath the third ship. These new military power cores actually handle the load better than our test units did. Time estimate. Gary wiped sweat from his forehead. We'll have all 10 ships ready within 12 hours. But Commander, he lowered his voice. The crews will need time to adjust to the new systems. This isn't like anything they've trained for. They'll have to learn fast, Eric replied grimly. The Tylaxians aren't going to wait. In the next ship over, Captain Daniel Hughes was running his crew through emergency procedures. They had stripped out some of the standard equipment to make room for the gravity systems, and everyone needed to understand the new capabilities and limitations. Remember, Daniel was saying, the field will protect us from most conventional weapons, but it's not perfect. If we lose power, we lose the field. Keep those backup systems running. Eric moved on, checking each ship and crew. They were the best pilots and warriors humanity had to offer, but they were about to attempt something that had never been done before. The gravity control technology would change the nature of space combat forever, assuming they survived long enough to use it. Commander Russell to the command center. The PA system announced. Priority message from Earth. Eric hurried to the nearby command center, where a holographic image of Admiral Morris was waiting. Status report, she demanded without preamble. 8 ships are in final stages of modification, Eric reported. The last 2 will be ready within 12 hours. Initial tests are showing better results than we hoped for. You have 10 hours, Patricia said flatly. The Tylaxian fleet has increased speed. They'll reach Saturn in 22 hours. Eric felt his stomach tighten. We'll be ready, Admiral. You'd better be. Humanity is counting on Project Nighthawk. Morris out. Back in the hangar, Eric found Katie running advanced maneuver simulations in the lead ship. Her face was intense with concentration as she pushed the gravity systems to their limits. "How's it handling?" he asked. "Better with each adjustment," she replied, not taking her eyes off the controls. "Look at this." She activated the main display, showing a complex series of movements. "The gravity field lets us change direction instantly, without worrying about inertia. We can even create localized gravity wells to deflect incoming fire." Eric watched as Katie demonstrated, her simulated ship performing maneuvers that would have torn a normal vessel apart. "Can you teach the other pilots to do this?" "Some of it," she said. "The basics are straightforward enough. The advanced moves will take more practice." But she finally looked up at him. "Commander, even the basic capabilities of these systems will give us an edge. The Hylaxians won't know what hit them." Over the next 8 hours, the hangar became a scene of controlled chaos. Engineers made final adjustments to the gravity field generators, while pilots ran simulation after simulation, learning to handle their transformed ships. Gary Peterson moved from vessel to vessel, fine-tuning each installation until he was satisfied with their performance. 3 hours before their deadline, Eric gathered all 10 crews in front of their ships. They looked tired but determined, their faces showing a mix of anxiety and excitement. "Project Nighthawk is now operational," he announced. "In 3 hours, we launch for Saturn. Everything we know about space combat is about to change. The Hylaxians think they have the advantage in technology and numbers. They're wrong." He looked at each crew member in turn. They don't know about the gravity control systems. They don't know that their superior numbers mean nothing when we can move in ways they can't predict or counter. Most importantly, they don't know about the courage and skill of the people standing in this hangar. Katie stepped forward. "All ships have been loaded with the latest simulation data. Study it during the transit to Saturn. Remember, the gravity fields will respond to your commands instantly. Trust your instincts, but be precise. One wrong move at high speed could be fatal." As the crews dispersed to make their final preparations, Eric walked to the hangar's observation window. The Martian sunset painted the sky in shades of red and gold, a stark reminder of what they were fighting to protect. Somewhere out there, the largest alien fleet humanity had ever encountered was bearing down on their solar system. But this time, humanity wasn't helpless. In these 10 ships, they had a weapon that could change everything. The gravity control technology wasn't just an advancement. It was a revolution in space warfare. Eric turned back to watch his crews at work. In a few hours, they would launch into history, carrying humanity's hopes with them. The real test was about to begin, and failure wasn't an option. "Commander," Katie called from her ship. "Final systems check is complete. All ships are reporting ready for launch." Eric nodded, feeling the weight of command settle on his shoulders. "Begin launch preparations. It's time to show the Hylaxians what humanity can do." Colonel Laura Bennett stood on the bridge of her ship, watching as the massive rings of Saturn filled the main viewport. The gas giant's golden glow provided a beautiful but eerie backdrop for what was about to become a battlefield. Behind her, Lieutenant Nathan Parker worked at his tactical station, monitoring the incoming Hylaxian fleet. 423 ships, Nathan reported, his voice steady despite the odds they faced. "Their formation is tight. They're not expecting any real resistance." "That's their first mistake," Laura said. She opened a channel to the other 9 ships of Project Nighthawk, hidden in the shadow of Saturn's largest moon, Titan. "All ships, sound off." One by one, the commanders reported in. Katie Martinez, now piloting the squad's lead interceptor, was last. "Gravity systems are all green," she reported, ready to show these aliens some new tricks. Laura allowed herself a small smile. "Remember your training. Wait for my signal, then execute pattern alpha. Let's show them what these gravity systems can do." The minutes ticked by slowly as the Hylaxian fleet approached. Their dark ships looked like a swarm of deadly insects against the starry background, their formation perfect and intimidating. They clearly expected this to be another easy victory. "They're entering range," Nathan announced. "First wave is approaching the outer defense platforms." Laura took a deep breath. "Let them fire first. Let's see what they do." The leading Xylaxian ships opened fire, their energy weapons lashing out at Saturn's defensive platforms. The platforms, already evacuated, exploded in bright flashes of light. "Now," Laura commanded. "Pattern Alpha. Execute." Katie's ship moved first, rocketing out from behind Titan at impossible speeds. The gravity drive allowed her to change direction instantly, without the usual limitations of momentum. She dove straight into the heart of the Xylaxian formation, her ship moving in ways that seemed to defy physics. The aliens reacted with predictable confusion. Their weapons tracked uselessly behind Katie's ship as she weaved between their vessels, her own weapons finding vulnerable spots in their formation. "Second wave, go," Laura ordered. 4 more ships of Project Nighthawk emerged, each creating their own localized gravity fields. They moved like dancers in a deadly ballet, their enhanced maneuverability making them nearly impossible to hit. "They're trying to regroup," Nathan reported, excitement creeping into his voice. "Their formation is breaking up." Laura watched as the Xylaxian fleet struggled to adapt to this new type of combat. Their ships were designed for traditional space warfare, where momentum and thrust determine movement. Against vessels that could control gravity itself, their tactical doctrine was useless. "Remaining ships, launch," she commanded. "Full assault pattern. Remember your training." The last 5 ships of Project Nighthawk, including Laura's command vessel, joined the battle. They spread out in a complex pattern, each ship creating gravitational disturbances that disrupted the Xylaxian fleet's coordination. Katie's voice came over the comm. "Watch this." Her ship suddenly created a powerful gravity, well right in the middle of a tight group of alien vessels. The Xylaxian ships, unable to compensate for the sudden gravitational shift, collided with each other in a spectacular display of destruction. "All ships, implement Nathan's gambit," Laura ordered, naming the tactic that her young lieutenant had developed during training. The human ships began creating a series of coordinated gravity fields, herding the Xylaxian vessels into smaller and smaller spaces. "They're trying to send a signal," Nathan reported. "Long-range communication to their home fleet." "Not today," Laura said grimly. "Katie, take out their command ship." Katie's ship dove through the chaos of battle, using the gravity drive to perform moves that looked more like something from a dream than real space combat. She created a gravity well behind her ship, using it to pull herself forward at incredible speed, then cut it off suddenly to stop dead in space. The maneuver put her directly behind the Xylaxian command ship. "Firing," Katie announced calmly. Her weapons found their mark, and the alien command ship erupted in a massive explosion. Without central coordination, the Xylaxian fleet began to fall into disarray. Some ships tried to retreat, while others fought on in smaller groups. But against the gravity-enhanced human vessels, they stood no chance. "They're breaking formation completely," Nathan reported. "Multiple ships attempting emergency jumps to faster than light speed." Laura opened a channel to all human ships. "Don't let them escape. We can't let them report what they've seen here." The battle became a chase, with the 10 ships of Project Nighthawk hunting down the retreating Xylaxians. The gravity drives proved just as effective in pursuit as they had in combat, allowing the human ships to catch and destroy vessel after vessel. 2 hours after the battle began, Nathan made his final report. "Last enemy ship destroyed, Colonel. The Saturn defense perimeter is secure." Laura looked at the battlefield display. Where there had once been over 400 Xylaxian ships, now there was only debris, scattered across space like a metallic cloud. Project Nighthawk had achieved the impossible. 10 ships had destroyed an entire alien battle fleet. "Damage report," she ordered. "Minor damage to 3 ships," Nathan replied. "No serious injuries. The gravity fields protected us from most of their weapons fire." Laura opened a channel to Earth. Admiral Morris, this is Colonel Bennett. The Thylaxian fleet has been destroyed. I repeat, total victory at Saturn. Project Nighthawk was successful beyond our highest expectations. There was a moment of silence before Patricia's voice came back, tight with emotion. Well done, Colonel. Well done to all of you. Return to Mars for debrief and refit. We'll need you ready in case they send another fleet. As Laura gave the order to return home, she looked out at Saturn's rings one last time. The battle had changed everything. Humanity had proven that it wasn't just capable of defending itself, it could dominate space warfare with its new technology. Katie's voice came over the private channel. Did you see their ships trying to turn and run? They couldn't believe what was happening. They came expecting an easy victory, Laura replied. Instead, they found out what happens when you underestimate human ingenuity. As Project Nighthawk's ships turned toward Mars, Laura thought about what this victory meant. The Thylaxians would be back, probably with an even larger fleet. But now, humanity had a weapon they couldn't counter, and more importantly, they had the confidence that came from facing overwhelming odds and winning. The next battle would be different. The Thylaxians would come prepared, or so they would think. But humanity would be ready too, with more gravity-enhanced ships and crews trained in the new form of space combat that Nathan and Katie had pioneered today. The war wasn't over, but today's battle had shown the galaxy something important. Humanity wasn't just another species to be conquered. They were innovators, warriors, and survivors. And now, they were masters of gravity itself. The grand meeting hall of the Human Defense Council gleamed under the morning sun streaming through its crystal dome. Ambassador Michelle Stewart adjusted her formal uniform as she watched the Thylaxian delegation enter. The aliens moved with a fluid grace that belied their warrior nature, their iridescent scales shifting colors in the sunlight. Chief Science Officer Andrew Collins stood beside her, holding a data pad containing the full technical specifications of humanity's gravity control technology. After the devastating defeat at Saturn, the Thylaxians had finally agreed to peace talks. Now came the most delicate part of the negotiations. They still think Saturn was a fluke, Andrew whispered. They believe we must have some secret fleet hidden away. Michelle nodded slightly. Then let's show them the truth. Admiral Patricia Morris led the human delegation, with Strategic Director Benjamin Carter at her side. They took their seats across from the Thylaxian High Commander, whose scales had taken on a deep purple hue, a sign of caution, according to their cultural briefings. High Commander, Patricia began, her voice carrying across the hall. We appreciate your willingness to discuss peace terms. Before we begin, we would like to offer a demonstration of the technology that you encountered at Saturn. The Thylaxian leader's translator hummed softly as it converted his clicking response. You claim 10 ships destroyed our battle fleet. This is impossible without hidden reinforcements. Michelle stepped forward. With your permission, we've prepared a demonstration that will explain everything. She gestured to the large view screen behind them. Dr. Collins. Andrew activated his data pad, and the screen came to life. It showed Katie Martinez's ship from the Saturn battle, with its gravity field generators highlighted in blue. What you witnessed at Saturn wasn't the result of superior numbers, Andrew explained. It was this, humanity's gravity control technology. He played a recording of Katie's ship performing its impossible maneuvers during the battle. The Thylaxian delegation stirred, their scales shifting through various colors as they watched. Their scientists leaned forward, mandibles clicking rapidly as they discussed what they were seeing. The technology allows us to create and manipulate localized gravitational fields, Andrew continued. This gives our ships complete control over their movement in space without the limitations of traditional propulsion. He switched to a technical display showing the energy efficiency of the system. The fields are nearly self-sustaining, requiring minimal power input. We can maintain them indefinitely during combat operations. The High Commander's scales had turned a pale green, a sign of intense interest. Show us more. the translator conveyed. Michelle nodded to Katie Martinez, who had been waiting in the wings. The pilot stepped forward and activated a small demonstration unit that Andrew's team had prepared. A metal sphere rose into the air above the conference table, surrounded by a visible gravitational distortion. The principles can be applied at any scale, Katie explained, using hand gestures to guide the sphere through a complex series of movements, from small objects to our largest ships. The Thylaxian scientists were now showing patches of bright yellow, their color of scientific excitement. One of them spoke rapidly, and the translator struggled to keep up. The energy requirements for such control should be enormous. How have you solved this? That's where Dr. Lane's breakthrough changed everything, Andrew replied. He brought up another diagram showing the quantum mechanics behind the technology. By creating self-reinforcing gravitational fields, we reduced the energy cost by nearly 99%. Impossible, one of the Thylaxian engineers clicked. But their color was shifting to white, the shade of dawning realization. Michelle seized the moment. Not impossible. This is why we wanted peace talks. Humanity doesn't want to continue this conflict. We're willing to share certain aspects of this technology as part of a comprehensive peace agreement. The High Commander's scales rippled through several colors before settling on a deep blue, their shade for serious contemplation. You could have kept this technology secret, used it to destroy our forces one by one. Why reveal it now? Patricia stepped forward. Because that's not who we are. Humanity has always believed that technology should bring people together, not drive them apart. We're offering you a choice. Continue a war that you now know you cannot win, or join us in exploring the possibilities this discovery opens up. Andrew activated the final part of his presentation. Simulations showing how gravity control technology could revolutionize space travel, construction, and exploration. Think of what our species could accomplish together, he said. The combined knowledge of both our civilizations working to understand and expand these capabilities. The Thylaxian delegation huddled together, their scales creating a shifting rainbow as they discussed among themselves. Minutes passed in tense silence before the High Commander turned back to face the humans. Your victory at Saturn was impressive, the translator conveyed. But this, the alien gestured at the technical displays. This is beyond impressive. This is revolutionary. Their scales settled into the gold shade of formal declaration. We accept your offer of peace talks. The tension in the room eased noticeably. Michelle smiled as she brought out the preliminary peace accords that her team had prepared. Then let's begin discussing the details. Over the next several hours, the two sides worked through the framework of a peace agreement. The Thylaxians would withdraw their remaining forces from human space. In exchange, humanity would share specified applications of the gravity control technology, while maintaining certain military applications as classified. As the meeting drew to a close, the High Commander approached Dr. Collins privately. Your species surprised us, the translator hummed. We thought we understood human capabilities. We were wrong. Andrew nodded. That's the thing about humans. We're at our best when faced with seemingly impossible challenges. It drives us to innovate, to find solutions that no one else has considered. The alien scales showed a new color, a shade of respectful appreciation that hadn't been in their cultural briefing. Perhaps that is why you succeeded where others failed. You did not try to match our technology. You created something entirely new. Later that evening, Michelle stood with Patricia on the observation deck of the council building, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Did you see their faces when Andrew showed them the energy efficiency data? Michelle asked. I didn't even know their scales could turn that shade of yellow. Patricia smiled. They came here thinking they were humoring us. They left knowing they'd underestimated humanity in a fundamental way. She turned to look at the city sprawling below them. This is just the beginning, you know. The gravity control technology will change everything, not just warfare, but how we live and work in space. Dr. Lane and his team are already talking about civilian applications, Michelle agreed. Space construction, planetary colonization, even medical uses. The possibilities are endless. As night fell over New Geneva, lights began to twinkle in the city below. Somewhere up there, beyond the atmosphere, the first of many new ships were being fitted with gravity control systems. Humanity had not only survived its first major interstellar conflict, it had emerged stronger, more capable, and with a technological advantage that would ensure its place among the stars. The war was over. The real adventure was just beginning.